The reading today is from Romans 7:14 through 21. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am of the flesh, sold into slavery under sin. I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now if I do what I do not want, I agree that the law is good. But in fact it is no longer I that do it, but sin that dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells within me, that is, in my flesh. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. Now if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I that do it, but sin that dwells within me. So I find it to be a law that when I want to do what is good, evil lies close at hand. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
A moment of prayer. Lord, as we read and hear your message today, that message written by Paul, one of your saints so long ago, we ask ourselves just exactly what does it mean and how does it apply today to us. We will try and figure that out and be with us, Lord, as we do that today. Amen. The title of my message is The Inner Struggle, Tug of War. Now, to start right off, I'm going to be honest with you. When I read that passage the first time, maybe the second time, maybe the third time, I went like, what? It's fairly complicated, but it's also very important. Pastor Taylor is going to be delivering the message at the next service. And maybe the title of his message is a little more appropriate than mine. It is, what did he just say? Yes, this is a very complicated message that we hear from Paul. There's no real easy way to put it. But, my friends, it is also very important because it says so much about how we as Christians stand smack dab in the middle of two worlds, don't we? Over here we have the world with all its temptations and let's get a job and let's do better and let's not let that guy cut us off and, on and on and on. And sometime a little, raising of the hand and so forth. And then we have this. We have our desire to be in a Christian community. We have a desire to be Christians and to follow those wonderful, wonderful teachings of Jesus that we learned maybe all the way back at first when we were 3 or 4 years old in Sunday school. It's tough. And this is what Paul is trying to say, and it is pretty complicated. So as I worked on it and talked to myself and read it and reread it, I came up with this image. And this image was of Paul sitting with a therapist. Now, Paul wasn't sitting with just any therapist. In a sense, he was sitting with some combination of Jesus Christ and God, and he was talking to them about the struggles that he was having and trying to follow the words of Jesus and also living in this world. Let me reread again this key thing. Paul says, "For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do." Each of us, in our own way, is somewhat like Paul. I know that for myself, and as I was telling someone this morning, as I thought about this message, I thought about how when I was 6, 7, 8 years old even, and I was trying to figure it out and sort it out, I would sit in church with my parents. And the pastor would be up there in front and raising his hands and telling us what to do. And even at that age, I thought about some of the things I had done the week before and maybe the way I had treated my playmates or talked to an adult. And I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. And then guess what? A week later, I was sitting in church, and I went, well, guess I better try again. Now, the things we say we don't want to do, they change. But things stay with us, and it is a struggle. So it came to my mind that what Paul was really talking about is a spiritual tug of war. Now, you know, Pastor Bob is gone, and Pastor Taylor has been doing a whole lot of things, and I haven't. We didn't quite get around to doing the slides that normally would be up here, but I had a beautiful one. And it was like a cartoon slide, and it showed 3 or 4 little children here and 3 or 4 little children here. And guess what they were playing? Tug of War. Did you ever play that? I bet you did. I hope you were on the winning team. Well, that's what we want to do. We want to be on the winning team. And doesn't that image or thought about children or really adults, really us, pulling on that rope and trying to get ourselves in the right position, talk about it, say so much to us? When I was looking through different material on this passage, I came across a gentleman by the name of Craig Condon. Now, Craig is a pastor out in New York City, in the Queens. You know, and we hear about that, and we go, ooh, that's a whole different world. I'm not going to New York City. But guess what? They have churches there. And he's a pastor. And he wrote about this passage. And I thought, well, I want to see what he has to say. And you know what? He said about the same thing that we're talking about. He's trying to be a Christian. He's in a somewhat different culture and surroundings, but he has the same struggles. And he is the one that came up with these words that I have been using today. It's a spiritual tug of war. So let's stop and think about that for a moment. Paul talks about this struggle by talking about his own personal struggle. So these words are complicated, and they kind of go back and forth. Well, if I did this, then I'd do that, but then I wouldn't do that, and But they're still there. And as I said, it's a very complicated but yet very important scripture. Because let's keep in mind who Paul was. Paul wrote a lot of the New Testament. Paul, who was converted from a life of sin to be a follower of Jesus, was a pillar of the church in the early church, and he went on 7 missionary trips. And let me tell you, that was pretty tough back then to get on some old wooden boat and sail off to some country without maybe even a compass. But he did it. He carried the church out to many communities. He had an awful lot to do with planting firmly in the ground and in the communities the church and helping to get started. And yet, guess what? He struggled. He had times when he wasn't sure if he was going to make it or if he could do it. What about you? Well, guess what? God is the one who decided to give us free will, didn't he? I sometimes wonder if he thinks twice about that when he looks down about the way we act. But he did, and I'm glad he did. But he also knew that we struggled and that we had a hard time dealing with that free will. Back in the old days, actually back in the days when Paul was growing up in the kind of faith and you might say religious beliefs that he dealt with before the time of Christ, the belief was of religious leaders then was you needed to do everything you could to be perfect. Well, of course, many people failed. Can you imagine how sad they were and how bad they felt, especially if they were really, really trying? Oh my, I failed again. What am I going to do? One of the things that happened, and you might have heard about this, was the Pharisees, the leaders of the church at that time. They thought, well, we have an answer. If people want to be perfect under the law, We'll write it down for them. So they came up with 613 rules. Those rules included things you could and could not do on Sunday. They included some of the things we have now, but they also have many, many things. And there really wasn't anything in those rules about forgiveness. It was more about this is what you need to do, and you better not do this. And then Jesus came along. Yes, our Jesus. And if you read in a number of places in the Bible, you will see it. And I especially like what Jesus put very clearly in the book of Matthew, where he said, all those old laws are done. I'll give you the two great commandments, to love one another and love your Lord. And you will have forgiveness. And then just to make sure we understood how great that forgiveness was, Jesus went up there on the cross, and he died for us. He died so we could be forgiven. And what are we doing here today? We're going to share together in this blessed table. This table, if it was a commercial, would be, this has been brought to you by Jesus. And it has. And this table is filled with forgiveness and is filled with grace. Now, what if that's still not enough for you? What if you still think, well, I keep trying, and I was here 2 Sundays ago or 3 Sundays ago, and I promised myself that aunt that I didn't like, or the way I talked to so-and-so, my neighbor, I was going to change, and I didn't quite make it. Oh, my. Is it worth it? Should I keep trying? Well, let me talk to you for a second about something that most of you know, and some of you wish you didn't know because the TV's on in your house all the time showing baseball games. Baseball. Now you're thinking, how do you connect this message to baseball? Well, it's simple. If you follow baseball, you know that people that get up there and they hit the ball, the idea is to hit it as often as you can and to get on base and to help your team score runs. Now, the thing in baseball is that if you are really, really, really good, you end up with a batting average somewhere in the 300s. What does that mean? It means that 3 out of 10 times, roughly, when you get up to bat, you get on base. You have a hit. And the other 7 times you strike out or you fly out. And guess what? One of the best baseball players of all time, Ty Cobb. Well, that's a name some of you might know and some younger people might not know. Ty Cobb's, that wonderful, wonderful, historic baseball player, his batting average was .366. Now, what does a baseball player do when their batting average starts to go down and they're having troubles? They practice. They go back to the basics. They go to their coach and they ask for help. Really, it's no different that we as Christians, what we should be doing. You know, if our batting average is going down and we look back at how we've been in this last week or few days, and we don't like it, well, then it's time not only for reflection. It might be even a time to pick up the Bible or come to a Bible class or make sure we're around more of our friends who lead the kind of life that we want to lead. Here's the really good news. You know who's on our team? God. You know who our batting coach is? Jesus. So the help is there. We know we're going to fail. We're going to have mistakes. But that's just part of it. The last thing I really want to mention is one of the songs that Bruce and Clarice just played was a few hymns out of Amazing Grace. And I want to say a couple things about that. That's a well-known hymn. Oh, isn't it? Can we get through a whole month of service without singing it at least once? It's one of the things I know that I certainly look forward to. Now, the thing about that hymn is that James Newton, the gentleman that wrote it, some of you may know, but he was a slave trader. A slave trader. He was a man who got in his ship from England and sailed over to Africa and helped to capture men and women and children even, and put them on his ship, put them down in the hold and bring them back to a country and sell them. And then he met that coach. He met God. And he turned things around. So if we think, well, I keep trying, but it's not going too well, that we should give up, let me just read a couple of the lines that you know so well. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound, it saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. It's such a wonderful, wonderful set of words. Well, that's the end of my message for today, but sort of you might call it a bonus. I came across this short little prayer that I just couldn't help but wanting to share with you. It was written by a Confederate soldier, a young man far away from home. And he wrote this, and from all we know, he was killed in battle at a later point. And it's fairly long, but I've just taken a few of the lines from there. I asked God for strength that I might achieve. I was made weak that I might learn humbly to obey. I asked for wealth that I might be happy. I was given poverty that I might be wise. I asked for all things that I might enjoy life. I was given life that I might enjoy all things. Powerful words.